everyone, thank you for joining us. Tonight we are going to be discussing Introduction to Excel Formulas with the Warren-Newport Public Library. My name is Rachel Murray and I will be leading you through tonight's class. Just a quick shout out before we get started to the Friends of the Warren-Newport Public Library. They sponsor all of the programs here at the library and we really appreciate their support. If you'd like more information about the library or the Friends group, please reach out to our website, WNPL.info. That's WNPL as in Warren-Newport Public Library. All right, let's go ahead and get started tonight. Our class is Introduction to Excel Formulas, and the library uses Excel 2013. However, if you have Excel 2007 through the current Microsoft 365 version, they will all be extremely similar. The functionality will be the same, and you should be able to actually do all of the different tasks that we discussed this evening using those versions of Excel. Now we are going to go ahead and get started. As I said before, this is Excel 2013, and I have a spreadsheet on my screen here. This spreadsheet has several different data sets, and I'm going to show you how we are going to use formulas and functions in Excel to manipulate the data on each of these sections. Now, you'll hear the words formula and function used interchangeably in Excel. They really do mean the same thing. Both of them are an equation or a calculation that Excel will perform for you. A function in Excel is just a preset formula. It's a formula that Excel has a shortcut for so that you can type in a command and then select the data, and it will perform that calculation for you. However, we can type in formulas ourselves. In fact, I'll show you on our very first example here how we can actually go in and do that. So on our data set, we are going to start with the purple set of data here. And what we have is some sales figures. We have several months worth of sales and across several different sales districts from California to Ohio. And we want to be able to add up this data to find some relations between the data, find some high and low points between this data. And Excel formulas can do that for us very quickly. Now, in the 2007 through the Office 365 versions of Excel, we utilize the ribbons and tab system. So right now we are on the Home tab and the Home ribbon. And when we go to find those preset formulas, those functions in Excel, we can find them on the Home ribbon all the way down at the end here. In the editing section, there is a shortcut to some of the most commonly used functions underneath the auto sum drop down arrow. And we can see that we have sum, which is to add, average, find the average, count numbers, tell us how many numbers are in specific cells, maximum and minimum. We also have the option for this more functions, which if we click that, it brings up a dialog box, a pop-up box that allows us to search for the function that we need. So if we have an idea of the type of data that we're searching for, but we really don't know what the actual name of that function would be, we can search for it here with real text, and then Excel will search for it through the list of commonly used functions. So don't forget about that. Again, to find that, we just clicked the drop down arrow under AutoSum, and then we went to more functions, and that lets us search for the formula or the function that we want to use. Now, as we learned in our last Excel class, when we want to have a formula entered into Excel, we need to select the cell that that formula should go into. Now, since we're going to be working with this purple set of data first, we're going to start at the very top with the first row of data. It's sales figures for the month of January across all of the different sales districts. And we want to find what the total is for all of those sales for January. Now, as I said before, there are several ways that we can get a hold of these formulas and functions. We can actually type in the formula. I would click in the cell that I want the result to appear in. In this case, it happens to be cell Q2. And then I could start typing the formula. Every formula and function in Excel begins with an equal sign. That's how Excel knows that you're actually saying, let's perform a calculation here. We could type that in, type the keyword, which would be sum, that's the command, and then indicate which cells we want to use, and it would give us that total. Now we can also, though, use these nice handy shortcuts that Excel already has set up for us. So let's try that. Again, we're going to start out with this first section right here. We want to find out what is the total of this data. So first I'm going to choose the cell I want the result to appear in, and I click Auto Sum. What happens is Excel tries to guess the section of data that I'm going to be using for this. So it did a good job. It selected that particular row of data, each of the individual states, and then it's calculating for me that this formula is going to say it's equal to the sum of cells J2 through cells P2. Now, the reason why we're using those cell references, J2, P2, K2, and so on, we're using those cell references because that way, if we have to go back and change the data in a cell, we don't have to redo all of our calculations. Using a cell reference tells Excel I want to use whatever number happens to be in cell J2. So if I get all new sales figures for the month of January, if people didn't update their numbers quickly and they come back at me with new numbers, I won't have to go back and redo all of my formulas. All I will have to do is update the number in the specific cell, and it will update the formula for me too. So that's why our formula looks like that. We're not adding 365 plus 557 and so on. We're saying add whatever happens to be in this cell to whatever happens to be in this cell to whatever happens to be in this cell. So it's already calculated the formula for us. All we have to do is press enter on our keyboard, and the result appears in the next available cell. So in this case, it's the cell that we selected originally. So it's going to appear in Q2. So our total is 2,587. If we look up in our formula bar, remember our formula bar always shows us what the formula is. The answer appears in the cell that we selected, but the formula that we used will always appear up in the formula bar. So that was pretty easy. That was pretty automated. We were able to just use the auto sum button. I'm going to show you another way to do it though, just so that you know there's always more than one way to do something in Excel. So to get rid of what we just did, I'm going to hit the undo button. That's way up here in the far left-hand corner. There's an arrow that's going off to the left. That is undo. Every time you click the undo button, it undoes the last action. So I click undo, and lo and behold, our formula is gone, our total is gone. So now I can show you another way to do this. This way, I'm going to actually just select the data that I want to add. That's going to be cells J2 through P2. And this time I click auto sum, and it should put the total in the next available cell. So as soon as I click auto sum, same answer we had before, 2,587. Same formula we had before, equal to sum of J2 through P2. But all I had to do was select the data and hit auto sum. We did it the other way around the first time. We selected the cell, hit auto sum, and it auto selected the data. So that's two different ways that we can quickly add up information that's in a row. You could do the exact same thing with a column. If you wanted to add up everything that was sold in California through this time period, you could select the column, hit auto sum, and it's going to put the total in the next available cell. I'm going to hit undo though, because we don't want that stray data hanging around. So we already were able to perform this function for the month of January. It's actually very easy for us to go back and replicate this formula across the rest of the months. Rather than go back and select the data and hit auto sum again, once we perform the calculation, we can use the handle button right here, this little tiny box that's in the lower right corner. If I put my cursor right over that, it turns to a plus sign. Now, if I double click there, it actually copies and pastes that particular formula and puts it in all of the rest of these cells. And it does it relative to the data that's there. So in this case, our formula was, it was equal to the sum of J2 through P2, which is all of this data here. If I click on cell Q3 though, it tells me that formula is equal to the sum of J3 through P3. So Excel understood when I copied and pasted that formula that I meant, oh, if I'm doing it in this cell in Q3, It means I want you to use all of the data that happens to be in row 3. Same thing with everything in row 4. I want you to use all of the data that happens to be in row 4, but it's using the exact same number of cells that we had originally chosen. So that was pretty quick. That allowed us to very, very quickly go back and paste that across this entire column. So in under just a few minutes, we were able to total all this up all the way down through August. So that was pretty easy. Now, how do we do the next task that's here on our set of data? They're asking us for the average. What's the average amount sold through the month of January through all of our different sales districts? To calculate that, we can again use our drop-down auto sum here. We can see that the second option is average. If I select average, right away, again, Excel tries to total up the average of all of the cells that are directly next to cell R2. Now, I can't just press enter on my keyboard though. The reason is Excel is trying to assume that I want to include the total in here. If I include the total in the average, it's actually going to throw my entire average off. So even though it automatically highlighted some data, I need to go back and tell Excel which data I really need it to use. So to do that, I'm going to put my cursor in cell J2 and I'm going to hold down my left mouse button. Now, as I do that, I am going to drag over to the right and select just the original state data. So just California through Ohio. When I've selected that, I let go of my mouse button. Now I'm no longer including the total in there, so the total is not going to throw my average off. Now I can press enter on my keyboard, and it shows me the average number of sales across all of those states in January is 370 sales. And if I look up in my formula bar, it tells me, oh, you wanted the average of just J2 through P2. So again, we're not including our total in here. We're just including the original states for the month of January, and the average number is here. Now, just like we did before, we could use the handle button and just double click, and it's going to paste all of that data across the rest of the column. We can also use traditional copy and paste. I've already clicked on cell R2 here. I can come over to my home ribbon and choose copy, and that automatically copies the information in cell R2. As soon as I copy that, you'll notice that there's a little dashed lines going in a circle around that number. That's telling me this is the information I just copied. This is the total and the formula that I just copied. So now I can select the cells that I want it to go to, and I can come back up to my ribbon and I can click paste, and it's going to automatically paste that total across the rest of the column. Now, it is easier, obviously, to just hit that handle button, but I wanted you to know that you can do it both ways. So if you're used to doing copy and paste and you're not quite comfortable using the handle button, you don't have to, but you can absolutely use copy and paste over here on the ribbon. You can also do right click and copy and then right click and paste. Both of those work. So you'll notice even after we finished our calculation and our pasting here, that this dashed circle is still going around 370. That is simply Excel saying, okay, what else do you want to do with this data? We can ignore that and go on to the next calculation, or to make it stop doing that, you can just click up on the formula bar and then click back down and it'll stop doing that. That tells Excel I'm done working with this data. So we quickly calculated the average. That was super fast across all of those territories, across all of those months. Now the next question is going to be, how do we find out what the highest number of sales were for each month? So let's start out again with January. Again, we want to find what the high number of sales are across all of these states for that time period. Once again, we're going to come up to the auto sum and click the drop-down menu. And this time we see that there's a command that says max. Max means high. It means the maximum value in a set of data. So we're going to choose max. And once again, it's trying to incorporate the average and the total into our formula. We just need to reselect the original data, cells J2 through P2. We press enter on our keyboard and it shows us the highest number of sales in January was 557. Now it's easy to eyeball this. We can go back and see we only have a small set of data here. We can say, yep, it's 557. But you can always be confident when you use a formula in Excel that as long as you've selected the right cells, it's going to give you the accurate number. So just like we did before with the handle button, I'm going to show you how to do that one more time. Putting my cursor right on top of that button in the lower right-hand corner, double click, copies and pastes that formula relative to the other cells all the way down that column. Now, the final question that we have for this set of data is how do we find the low number? So just like we found the highest number of sales in that month, now we want to find the lowest number of sales. So same thing, we're going to start in the first cell. We're going to come up to auto sum and select minimum. We're going to reselect our data to have the accurate data count, press enter, and we have 169. We click back on that original formula. We can see it says 169 here. Checking our formula bar tells us that that 169 is equal to the minimum of J2 through P2. So to copy and paste that formula, we use the handle button, double click. We do that again. And away it goes all the way down the column. So in just a few minutes, we were able to total all of this data, find the average number of sales, find the highest number of sales, and the lowest number of sales for each month across each of these states. So you can see that Excel can very, very quickly handle a lot of data and perform similar calculations over and over again. If we sat here and did this with a calculator, of course it's possible to do it, but it would take us significantly longer to do so. So that's our first set of data. We are now actually going to move down here and use this blue set of data. This time, instead of using our shortcuts on the Home tab, I'm actually going to have us using our Formulas tab and utilizing some of the formulas that we see up here at the top. So this blue set of data gives us a sample number. In this case, it's 6.3728. That's the number that it gives us. And then it's asking us some questions about this number. It wants us to find the integer value of this number. It wants us to round it to 2 decimal places, round it to no decimal places, and then round it to -1 decimal places. Now, because Excel is made to work with numbers, we have all of these math and trig options up here at the top. So we have all of these different commands that we can go through to actually find the answers to these questions. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to use this set of data and use our math and trig functions to do some calculations with this number. So just like we did before, we want to click on the cell that we want our total, our result, our calculation to appear in. Now the question is, what's the integer value of this number? So to do that, we actually need to come up and go to our math and trig. And you'll notice as we go through this list of different functions, as we hover over each word command, it tells us what this command does. And it also tells us what we're going to need to select in order to get this answer. So I'm going to kind of come down my list here. I'm looking for integer values. So I'm going to start looking by name. And lo and behold, right here, INT. It says integer number, rounds a number down to the nearest integer value. So it's going to find us the lowest rounded number that we can get from this particular value to a whole number. So I'm going to select integer to tell Excel this is what I'm trying to calculate. Now, as soon as I select something from the Formulas tab using this menu up here, I'm going to get a dialog box. This pop-up window or dialog box is asking me what numbers I want to work with. So now I need to tell Excel which numbers I want to find the integer value for. So I've already got the cell right here that I want my answer to appear in. I need to go back and tell Excel which cell contains the number that I need to find the integer for. Now I can tell you right here, it's this one right here, but I need to tell Excel that. So utilizing this little box right here, you'll see at the very end of it, there is a button with an arrow pointing out. This is kind of the retrieve button. It's saying, go find the data that you need to put into this field. So using my mouse, if I click on that arrow button, it minimizes my dialog box. Now I can go on my spreadsheet and click on the data that I want to use. So in this case, it's going to be this cell right here. It's cell J14. As soon as I click there, it inputs it into my little pop-up box up here. So now we'll notice this red arrow is pointing down. This is my input. This is, hey, enter this into this particular calculation button. As soon as I do that, J14 is listed here. Now I can just say OK on my dialog box. And right away, instead of a number with decimals in it, I now have 6.0. It's a solid number. It's the closest integer. It's rounded down to the closest whole number. If I click on that cell, I can look up in my formula bar, and here's my formula. This number is equal to the integer value of cell J14. So we did that again using our formulas tab and going into the function library and finding the correct function. Now, the next question that it's asking us for is, how do we round it to 2 decimal places? Right now, it's actually out to 4 decimal places. How do we round it to 2? Same thing as before, we're going to click on the cell that we want the answer to appear in. We're going to come up to our function library and click the drop down. And now this time we're looking to round it. So where do we find round? Here it is down here. We've got round down, round down, round up. Didn't say that it wants us to round up or down. It just wants us to round. So I'm going to choose round. And again, I get my dialog box. This time I've got 2 different fields that I need to figure out. I need to say what's the number that I want to round, and I need to tell it the number of digits to round it to. So just like before, I'm going to click the input arrow. I'm going to select the cell that I want to utilize. It populates my dialog box, so I click on the input arrow. And now this time I'm going to type in how many digits I want to round it to. So I'm just going to type in the number 2. That was what my parameters were, round it to 2 places. So I can already see in my dialog box that it's already giving me an answer. So I can really kind of preview and say whether or not I've done this properly if I have an idea of what the answer should be. So I know it should be 6.37. That's what it should round it to. And I can see right there that that is what it's rounding it to. So if I say OK, I get that number now in my cell J16. So that was rounded to 2 decimal places. The next question is, how do we round it to no decimal places or 0 decimal places? Just as we did before, we select the cell where we want this answer to be, go up to Math and Trig. We're going to find round again. This time, again, we click the input arrow. We select the number that we're trying to round. Say add that into my equation. Now we need to type in the number of digits. And since we said we're rounding to 0 digits, we type the number 0. You can already see it should just be 6. We click OK, and there it is. It rounded it to 6. Now the last question that it's asking us here is, how do we round to -1 decimal place? -1 decimal place, if you think about it, decimal means we're working on a number 10 system. Deca means 10. So we're actually, by rounding to -1 decimal place, we're going to be rounding to the nearest value of 10. So we need to find what's the nearest value of 10 for this number up here. So again, to do that, we're going to click on the cell where we want the number to the result to appear. We go up to Math and Trig. And again, we're going to choose round. We're going to retrieve the number that we want to input into our formula. This time, we're going to say we want -1 decimal places. Now, as I said, we're trying to calculate the value of the nearest value of 10. We can see right here the answer is 10. So if we say OK, 10 is what appears on our spreadsheet. So this is just utilizing these preset functions, these preset commands that we have in Excel, and saying, okay, we're going to work with these preset commands, put them into our spreadsheet, and it's going to grant us a new calculation each time that we do it. So this was, this is a little bit math jargony, but it actually is an effective exercise because it lets us see what a lot of these functions do. Now, the next set of values that we're going to work with is going to be this kind of orange or peach set right here. And this time, I'm actually going to show you how we can name a set of data and utilize the named set of data instead of selecting cell reference numbers. So rather than saying cell M15, cell M16, and so on, we're actually going to name this set of data and then use the name of that value to perform our calculations. So let's go ahead and do that. We've got a set of values here, and we can see that it's asking us to count the number of numerical values and count the number of alphanumeric values. So numeric means we want to count how many numbers happen to be in this set of data. Alphanumeric would be anything that you can type on your keyboard, really. So first, we're going to start by naming this range of data. Now, we're not selecting the title of this column. We're just actually selecting the data that we're working with. So I've highlighted the cells that are in this section. Now, there's two ways that we can name this data set. I can either come up to my Formulas tab, and in the ribbon right here, it says Define Name. If I click here, it's going to give me a dialog box that lets me name that set of data. I can also put my cursor right over the data I selected and right-click my mouse button. As soon as I do that, the menu that comes up right down here at the bottom, it says Define Name. So you can do it either way. I'm going to select Define Name from the pop-up menu. And you can see I get another dialog box that once again is asking me, well, it's asking you questions. It's saying, what do you want to name this? Now, I've already selected my data, so it already has the data that I'm naming, but it's asking me, what do you want to name it? What's the scope of this name? Is it throughout this workbook or is it just this worksheet? I can even put comments in here. I can say, this is why I've named it this. So if anybody else looking at the spreadsheet has questions, they would be able to open this dialog box up and see why I named it this. I'm actually going to just call this values. So in the name field, I've typed values. And now I'm going to click OK. So now this set of data is going to be known as my values set. So now when I go and I put a formula in here, instead of giving the range of cells, I can just give the name of the set of data. This is really effective if you've got thousands and thousands of rows of information and you want to name that whole set of rows, that whole area of rows. You would just click on the column and name that set of data. So if you had a really huge table, you'd actually be able to do that fairly easily. But the first question that this is asking us is, can we count the numerical values for this set of data? And we can do that actually really easily. So once again, we select the cell that we want the value to go into. That's going to be cell M22. Now we go up to our Formulas tab again, and this time we want to look for our statistical functions. So under More Functions, statistical is right here. And we are actually counting some data here. So we want to count the number of cells that contain numbers. We can see right here, that's what count does. So I'm going to select that. Now I just need to tell Excel which numbers I want to use. So to do that, I'm actually going to type in where it says value 1. I'm going to type the label that we picked or the name that we picked for that set of data, which is values. So under value 1, I type the word values and I say, okay. So what I get is 3. I can see the number 3 is my result. Up here, it's telling me that this number is equal to the count of alphanumeric numbers or symbols in the group called values. Going back and double checking it, I can see that 3 is the correct number. 15 is a number, 100 is a number, 25.3 is a number. Now I know technically 1 is a number as well, but it has an asterisk in front of it. So it's not really a standard numerical value. So it really did count the cells that just had numbers in it. Now the next question is count the alphanumeric values. So once again, we're going to click on the cell that we want that result to appear in. We're going to come up to our statistical functions. And this time, if I hover over count A, it actually is going to tell me the number of cells in a range that are not empty. Now remember, an alphanumeric value is anything really that I can type on my keyboard. So if there's anything in a cell, it's not going to count it as empty. So I'm going to choose count A. Same thing that I did before. I'm once again going to type in the label of the data that I'm using, which is values. And I'm going to say, okay. So now my result is 6. Again, I can see here's my formula up here. It's count A. And I can easily double check this as well. Yes, there's a value in this cell. That's 1, 2, 3, even though it's a hyphen, there's something in there. 4, 5, there's nothing in this cell. And then there's something in this cell. So it's telling me that there's really something in every cell here except for 1. So it's giving me the total is 6. This is important if you have a column with a ton of data in it and you're trying to figure out if you skipped anything. So going through an entire column, going through an entire row, and looking for the alphanumeric values will easily tell you if you skipped something. If you know that you've got 500 rows of data and you do count alphanumeric values and it tells you you have 498 cells with alphanumeric values in it, you know that you missed 2 cells. So this actually lets you see where you might have skipped entering data. For a really large spreadsheet, for a really large data set, this can be very, very valuable to use. It will save you a lot of time scrolling and looking through and trying to figure out where exactly did I miss that entry. So don't forget about that. Count can be really useful to let you know what you've entered something into and what you have not. Okay, so the next set of data that we're going to look at is actually going to be this turquoise one down here. And this works with this larger green set of data that we have over here to the left. And this is a pretty good size set. We've got, looks like about 39 different fields there, 39 different rows, and we've got 5 different columns of data. So we're going to utilize this data set to figure out the answers to the questions down here in turquoise. So again, we want to say, what's it asking us? We want to find out what the number of hourly employees are for this whole employment list. So there's a couple of quick ways to do this. Let me show you this way. So again, we want our answer to appear in this cell. That's going to be in cell J25. So we're going to click in the cell that we want it to appear in. If you were trying to have it appear at the bottom of your spreadsheet, you could do that. You would just select the cell that you want it to appear in, but we're going to have it off here to the side. So this first one, number of hourly employees. So we can look over here on this set of data and we can see that it looks like that answer would be under status. So we want to count every place that it says the word hourly because we're looking for hourly employees. So again, we're going to go up to our functions and statistical, and this time we're going to use Countif. We want to count all of the cells if they contain a specific term or a specific set of data. So we're going to choose Countif. Once again, we get a pop-up menu or a dialog box. This time we need to say what the data range is, and then we need to say what the criteria is. So again, our criteria is hourly employees. So criteria is easy. We can automatically type in hourly because we know that that's what we're looking for already. Now we need to tell Excel what the data range is. I'm going to click the input button here, or excuse me, the retrieve button here. And again, we're going to minimize that dialog box. Now there's 2 ways I can select this data. Because I know that there's nothing else on this spreadsheet other than what I can see on the screen right now, I could actually select all of column B because it's going to give me the answer for all of this data in column B. Now, let's say I had another data set below this green set. I wouldn't be able to do this because it would be selecting anything going down from here throughout the entirety of column B for this entire worksheet. But in this case, I don't have data below that. So I actually can just choose the column and it selects everything. If I did have other data below this, I would simply manually select the column like this and go all the way down to that whole set. So you can do it either way. You can select the column if you know that this is the only set of data that's in column B, or you can manually just select the cells. Once you do that, it inputs it into your formula here. It's your function argument. Now I'm going to click the input button and say, yep, this is the data that I want to use. Now I'm going to say, okay, this executes the formula and my answer is 4. Now, since we have a small data set, I can go back and see, is that right? Are there only 4 hourly employees? And there are. Hourly employee, hourly employee, hourly employee, hourly employee. So we could do the same thing if we were looking for half-time employees or full-time employees. You'd be able to go back and look for contract employees. You'd be able to use whatever term, whatever value you actually want to go back and search by using that Countif. It's going to count the cell only if it contains the term that you give it. Now, our next question is the number of employees with a salary of more than $50,000. So in this case, we're still going to be doing a Countif. We want to count something, but we're doing Countif if it applies to a specific set of data. So this time we're going to go back and we're going to select salary, and we're going to be counting things that only are over $50,000. So let's go ahead and do that. We select the cell that we want our answer to appear in. And then once again, we're going to go up to our function dropdown and choose statistical. And we're looking for Countif again. So Countif is right here. Now we need to tell this that we're looking for only values for that set of data over $50,000. So once again, I'm going to fill out my criteria first. I know that we are looking for anything that is greater than $50,000. So I'm typing in the caret that opens to the left. That's my greater than symbol. And then the number that I want to find everything bigger than. So I'm saying this is greater than $50,000. Now I need to go and retrieve the data that I'm going to use for those salary figures. This time I'm going to click the retrieval button and I'm going to just choose column E. Once again, I know there's no data below this, so I can just choose the entire column. I click the input button and now I'm going to say okay. And my answer is 16. Just going back and eyeballing my set of data here, I can see that, yep, that's greater than $50,000. That's greater than $50,000. That's greater than $50,000, and so on. There are 16 employees that make more than $50,000. You could do it the other way if you wanted to find out how many people make under $50,000. Again, we would just do Countif. We're going to put our criteria in this time as being, I want people that make less than $50,000. Once again, we choose our data range, which is the salaries. We input that and say, okay. So there were 16 people that make more than that. Oh, wait, that didn't work. Anytime you see something that does not look like it's in agreement with what should be on your spreadsheet, notice this says 39.0. That does not look correct. I did not calculate a decimal place in there, and that number just doesn't look right for what I calculated. Always go back and hit undo. That always undoes the last thing that you did. So once again, I'm back to my original total here. I'm going to delete that original total, and I'm going to go back and do it again. I'm going to go up to functions, statistical. Again, I want to do Countif. I'm going to say what my data range is. It's column E, input, and now my criteria. I had chosen before that I wanted to do less than $50,000. I'm going to say, okay. It's 23 is the correct answer. So right away, I could tell that there was something wrong with that number because it had a decimal place and I had not actually added decimal places into anything and I had not requested decimal places. So clearly I had hit something that I didn't realize I had hit. Always utilize that undo button. It can be your best friend when working with anything in Excel. And the nice thing is if you go up to undo, and you click that drop down, you can actually go back and see what it is that you did. So you can go back and say, oh, I see what I did wrong here. I actually, put a decimal place in there someplace, and so it was finding something different. So you can always go back and either select the last thing that you did or several things that you did to undo an entire process. So anyway, but that's how you use Countif. We could actually do a lot of different things with the data that's on this spreadsheet. We'd actually be able to go back and we could count how many years somebody had been working there, or say how many people had a specific job rating. Those are things that we can do as we get more into the data that we're working with and we feel more comfortable using Excel. But each of the different steps that I showed you tonight, if you can master remembering how to manipulate data using those, remembering how to input those functions and formulas, you will find that you get a lot more use out of Excel and that you have a lot more confidence in using it. Now, as I said at the beginning of our class, I do usually, when we're hosting this class, I send out all of the different handouts. One of those handouts is actually the step-by-step breakdown of each of those different things that I just asked you to do, each of those different functions, and how we actually put them into the computer. So if you're doing this at home and you would really like to get a hold of that answer sheet, by all means, email me at rmurray@wnpl.info. That's RMURRAY at WNPL.info. And I'll be happy to send that to you. I can also send you this sample spreadsheet so that you can work with this and try out each of these different functions. And the sample spreadsheet actually has a nice solution sheet on the back of it. So we can send you both of those so that you can sit down and practice with this. So it's really a good idea to sit down and try these as much as you can, and then to go and start trying some other things. Start totaling some columns. Start finding some different relationships of the data that you're seeing in some of the rows. And take some time to look through the different functions that are available. There's a lot. Excel is an extremely, extremely powerful tool. But that's all we have to cover for tonight. So I thank you very much for attending our Introduction to Excel Formulas class. And I really do invite you to continue to try to work on Excel. If you'd like to expand your experience with Excel beyond what the library teaches, we actually have 2 products that you have free access to with your Warren-Newport library card. We have Gale Courses and we have LinkedIn Learning. Gale Courses is a database that we subscribe to that provides online access to 6-week instructor-led classes. And these classes are everything from Excel through different Microsoft products to computer programming to even things like photography. So if you're interested and you have a Warren-Newport library card, you can go to our website and go to the Discover tab, and you'll actually find our list of databases, and Gale Courses is listed there. It does require you to input your library card number, but once you do, you have free use of that tool. LinkedIn Learning is kind of the same thing, except that it's smaller little bites of courses. As opposed to a full 6-week class where you're showing up to online class a couple of times a week, LinkedIn Learning has shorter videos that cover very specific topics. And they have things like doing Excel tables, doing Excel charts, using pivot tables in Excel. And you can watch the videos. They all come with a transcript. They all come with practice exercises. And you can also follow along with the video. So they are really effective courses to take. And they will get you into far more depth using Excel than what the library can give you in an hour or 2. So definitely check out those resources. And if you don't have a Warren-Newport library card, please check with your home library because many libraries have resources like this or similar resources. But thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate your attention and have a great evening.